Thank you everyone for joining. My name's Saxon. I'm the recruitment officer for the Faculty of Science and spend a lot of my time talking about the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine program and answering a lot of your questions via our inquiries. Here with me today is Emma Cosgrove, our DVM guru, who will be answering all your questions about the accelerated pathway via the Bachelor of Science into the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine program. Before we start, I would just like to make a small acknowledgement of country, just paying my respects to any elders past or present and emerging who are joining us today, and giving thanks for the lands that we're joining from today. Otherwise, I'll pass on to Emma to kick it off with the presentation, and we'll have some ongoing Q&A throughout the session where I'll just be answering them on this event platform, but I will be saving some more frequently asked questions that you may ask throughout the session to answer at the end. Otherwise, I'll let Emma get started.
Thank you, Saxon, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today to talk about all things weird and wonderful with the DVM Accelerated Pathway program. As Saxon said, my name's Emma Cosgrove. I'm the Manager of Teaching Support in the Faculty of Science, and one of the things under my purview is DVM admissions. So that's why I'm here to talk to you all. So in today's session, we're going to cover pretty much everything that you will need to know about applying for the Accelerated Pathway or the Veterinary BioSciences major. We're going to go through the eligibility and the application process, a few of the application requirements that you'll see when you're completing your application, guaranteed entry pathways, which might interest some of you, fees and course costs, outline of the selection process, how we actually conduct the selection, some next steps that you can take after this session has concluded, and then as Saxon said, we'll go into a Q&A session. So a quick breakdown of the places that we have. I think this is one of the most common questions that we do receive. How many places do we have in the program? How are they broken down in terms of fee categories? So in 2023, the intake had 160 places. We expect it will be 160 again for the 2024 intake. In terms of Commonwealth supported places, so government subsidised places, we will expect to have around about 60 to 65. 30 to 35 of these will be Australian full fee paying places. So that's for domestic students that don't receive the CSP government subsidised place. And then approximately 60 to 65 international places. So the breakdown is expected to be the same again for this upcoming intake. One thing that often comes up is how many of these places are allocated to accelerated pathway students versus the students coming in through the graduate entry or the normal pathway. The answer is that we don't actually specify how many need to come from either group. So the ranking is done with both sets of applicants together, and whoever receives a place, whoever's highest ranked will receive a place. It doesn't matter whether you come from the accelerated pathway or graduate entry. The difference between the graduate entry and the undergraduate entry, of course, is that the undergraduate entry is for students who have completed their second year of Bachelor of Science at the University of Melbourne. You complete what is effectively the first year of the DVM in your third year of your Bachelor of Science, and then you formally articulate to the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine at year 2. In terms of eligibility, the first thing is that applicants need to have completed Frontiers in Veterinary Science. I believe everybody who's been invited to this webinar has completed that. You must also have completed a level 2 biochemistry subject. You must have also completed a biology, which I'm pretty sure you would have had to have done in order to get to the biochem and the Frontiers in Vet Science anyway. And the other thing is that you need to have completed 200 credit points in your Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Biomedicine, if there are some here who are in Bachelor of Biomedicine. And this has to be completed by the end of December 2023. So in the past, some students looked to complete their credit points over summer. leading into the 2024 school year. That isn't the case anymore. So all 200 credit points have to be completed by the end of this year in order to be eligible for selection for the accelerated pathway next year. Little bit about the application process. So applications are opening on the 5th of September. So I think that's next Tuesday. And they'll be open for around about 6 weeks. The absolute number one key thing to remember is that you actually are applying for the 2025 intake. So yes, the accelerated pathway program would be starting in 2024, but you need to remember that you will still be in your Bachelor of Science for that first year, and therefore the application actually is for the 2025 intake. So the graduate entry 2024 intake is a separate application window, which will happen after the 17th of October. And therefore, it's really important that applicants are not applying for that intake.
Emma, sorry, just to check in. Have you shared your sound on your sharing options?
I think so.
I thought so as well. Could you double check that you've shared sound just on there should be a little bar at the top.
Yes, yeah.
That's click share. Okay,
yeah.
That's all right. I just got an inquiry from a student saying that was not working for them, but that's okay. Just continue. That should be working.
Okay, all right. Well, if anybody else can't hear me, please sing out. Yes, so as I was saying, please make sure that you don't apply to the 2024 intake. That would actually mean that you have missed the bus because the 2024 intake for the domestic applicants isn't going to be open until the accelerated pathway applications are closed. Assistance with the application. So because we do know who the applicants are, they're our students who have completed Frontiers in Vet Science, we actually do provide a detailed instruction sheet. We'll send that out probably within the next week so that you can use that alongside your application while you're completing your application. It has information about what is required in each section, just to kind of clarify some of the common questions that might come up while you're doing the application. We know who you are, so we'll be able to send that out to you proactively. So the application requirements, so when you complete the DVM application, there will be a number of requirements that you'll be either asked to upload documentation against, or you need to answer, or you need to provide an acknowledgement that you understand this requirement as part of the course. So some of the mandatory requirements, animal handling, environmental health and safety requirements, so an acknowledgement that you will have to undertake. What we have now is the large animal handling training program that will be done at our Dookie campus in the first few weeks of semester of the first year. All DVM students have to have had their appropriate vaccinations, Q fever and tetanus vaccinations. So there is an acknowledgement in the application that you will have those vaccinations done. We go through consent to use of animals in teaching, the core participation requirements, also known as the inherent requirements for the course. They're outlined in the handbook for the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, but that will also be provided in the application. The situational judgment test, and we'll get to details about the situational judgment test and the personal statement in a little bit. Contact details of referees who can attest to the accuracy of the information provided in the personal statement, and official transcripts from any credited study towards your existing Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Biomedicine at the University of Melbourne. And that includes study abroad or exchange study that you might have undertaken. So this is a really, really important one. We don't ask University of Melbourne students to provide a transcript of their University of Melbourne study because we have access to that. We know your marks, that's all okay. But it's really important that if you have studied anywhere else before coming to the University of Melbourne, or if you have gone on study abroad or exchange, that you are providing the transcripts in your application for that study. So anything that you have any credit for in the Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Biomedicine, we need the official transcripts from the institutions from which that accredited study has come. So please make sure you do that. A couple of the optional application requirements. We have Graduate Access Melbourne, which is for domestic applicants only, and that's the university's equity scheme. I'll talk about that a little bit in a little bit. And then we also have a Calculating Your GPA, and that's for those who studied in 2020. So the majority of people I expect on this call will not have studied in 2020. But if you have, we did have in place a mechanism to address some of the challenges that came up through COVID and the rapid move to online teaching in 2020. So applicants can have a look at what that offering was and make their selections accordingly. The personal statement, we get lots of questions about the personal statement, and actually I'm sure you'll be happy to know that as of this year, we've actually provided a template which will make it a little bit easier for applicants to know exactly what they need to provide in the personal statement. So that's available on our website, but it's also available in the application form itself, a template that you can download, fill out, and then re-upload to your application. The personal statement has two components. It has a written statement, so that's a maximum of 500 words, where you can talk about your personal motivation to study the DVM, and any sort of achievements, community involvement, things that you've done that you feel would be relevant to your application. And as well as that written statement, we also ask for, well, there's a table there where we ask you to complete any relevant work experience that you might have done, the start and end dates of those, approximate number of hours and days. Now, just to be clear, there's no expectation that you have completed any work experience in veterinary medicine or in associated fields in order to get into the DVM. There's no expectation whatsoever. This is simply just one of the tools that we have as part of our DVM application process to acknowledge those who do have that experience. In terms of the referees, so we do ask for 2 to 3 referees that you can provide details for, who we can contact to verify the information that's been provided in that personal statement. Please don't provide any written references from whether that be people that you've worked with or academic staff. It's not part of our selection procedure, and therefore they will not be considered. The situational judgment test, many of you would have heard of a Casper test before. This is run by Acuity Insights, and it's essentially a non-academic selection tool as part of our selection procedure. So this is going to assess what we call people skills. So skills like empathy, problem solving, resilience, professionalism, and it's applied slightly differently depending on whether you're a domestic or an international student, which I'll get to in a bit. It will cost approximately $90 to undertake the test, and it has to be done online. There is a website link that we'll be able to provide, and it's also on our website in terms of registering for that test. All applicants must complete the Casper test. We have designated Casper test dates for the DVM at the University of Melbourne. So those are the 5 test dates that we have this year. 2 of them you can see have already been completed. So if you haven't already done the Casper test, you will need to do it on one of the remaining 3 test dates. If you have completed a Casper test in previous years or a Casper test for a different course, they are not applicable to DVM selection for this coming intake. So please make sure you're completing one of those 5 that are listed there. Graduate Access Melbourne, as I said before, this is only for domestic applicants. It is the university's equity scheme. It's designed to provide bonus points or additional points on the DVM weighted average mark, so as an element of our selection procedure for students either from underrepresented groups in higher education or students who have had circumstances affect their academic performance in their undergraduate degree. So there are prescribed categories and they're listed here. These are the prescribed categories under which an applicant can apply for Graduate Access Melbourne. You don't have to only apply for one. You don't have to apply for any, of course, but you can apply for multiple if multiple apply to you. We require documentation and a statement against any and all that you do choose to apply under. And there is also a University of Melbourne Graduate Access Melbourne website where you can get more information about the requirements. I'm going to go into a little bit now about the alternate pathways to get into the accelerated pathway. So we have the competitive entry, which is the standard way that most of you will be applying, but there is a special scheme for high achieving school leavers. So this is for students who have done well in their final year of school and have commenced their undergraduate degree immediately following school at the University of Melbourne. So there are two pathways, guaranteed pathways. There's the graduate degree package and then there's guaranteed entry. So the graduate degree package is for the CSP and international places. So if you want a guaranteed CSP or a guaranteed international place in the DVM, it would go through the GDP process. And that's for students who have actually applied for a combined package of the Bachelor of Science and the DVM through VTAC at the conclusion of their schooling in Australia. So those who have a GDP will already know they have a GDP. For guaranteed entry, this is for students who haven't applied for the Bachelor of Science DVM package at the end of year 12. And we have Australian full fee paying places and international places through the GE pathway. And as I said, no prior application is required for that. And we will consider all applicants who apply for the accelerated pathway under the guaranteed entry scheme. So we'll be able to go in and check whether you meet the criteria for a guaranteed entry offer. Just to provide a little further detail about the criteria under which the High Achieving School Leavers program exists. Under the domestic pathways, a GDP would be for the students who have an ATAR of 98.5 or higher, and of course, who applied for the BSc DVM GDP via VTAC. And for guaranteed entry, so an guaranteed Australian full fee paying place, that's an ATAR of 95 or higher. For international applicants, a guaranteed overseas fee paying place is for students who have an ATAR of 95 or higher, or an IB score of 36 or higher. And guaranteed entry would be only for a small subset of international students, either those who have come to the university, to Trinity College and achieved an 87 or higher, and those who have completed their GCE Singapore A levels with a score of AAB 13 or higher. There are also conditions placed on students who meet that criteria from their year 12 studies. So students still need to maintain a 70% average across their level 1 subjects in the Bachelor of Science, a 70% average across their level 2 and any completed level 3. And when I say any completed level 3, I mean completed level 3 within those 200 credit points. So before applying, that's not a condition that's placed on your level 3 subjects in the Veterinary BioSciences major. Applicants or students need to have completed the prerequisite subjects, biology, biochemistry, frontiers in vet science, and achieve a satisfactory performance in the situational judgment test. So that's meeting a satisfactory performance benchmark as specified by the selection committee. There are typically around about 10 to 20 domestic applicants each year who will enter the accelerated pathway program via the guaranteed entry pathways. This can vary though from year to year, just depending on the applicant pool that we receive. Going into fees and course costs. As I've mentioned, there are the 3 categories for the DVM. So you'll either have a Commonwealth supported place, so that's that government supported place in the DVM. At the moment, the 2023 figure is around about $11,800 per year in the DVM. That will probably be slightly indexed year on year. The Australian full fee paying place around about $65,000, and an overseas fee paying place around about $80,000. So one of the benefits, I suppose, of being in the accelerated pathway is that for your first year of your DVM, as you're still a Bachelor of Science student, you'll continue to pay the fees per your Bachelor of Science. And it will be once you've completed the Bachelor of Science and you're moving into your second year of the DVM that you actually then start paying the fees per whatever fee category you were offered for your DVM application. So it's really important to note for applicants who do receive an Australian full fee paying place in the DVM, once you have moved into your second year, i.e. when you have officially started the DVM, there is no opportunity to change to a CSP at a later stage. You will be given an Australian full fee paying place, and that will be your fee category for the remaining 3 years of the program. So we're very upfront with applicants about the costs associated with an Australian full fee paying place and an international place, because it is a significant commitment, and it's important to remember that if you have an Australian help loan, so deferring for a government loan, that will not cover the entirety of your studies. So depending on your prior study, your individual circumstances, when at what stage of the course you reach that limit will depend, but it's important to know that it will not cover the full course. So you will have to be mindful of being able to source the remaining funds independently. There are some other course costs outside of just your tuition fees that you also have to bear in mind. So you have the student services and amenities fees. Students with CFPs in the Bachelor of Science would probably already be familiar with that. There's also costs associated with the mandatory vaccinations, costs associated with boots and lab coats, dissection kits, safety equipment, transport to our Werribee campus. So there are a number of days that students have to go out to Werribee, and also accommodation and transport for the preclinical and clinical placements, which are done throughout the full 4 years of the degree. An optional cost, not mandatory, but if you want to be a member of the VSSB, then that also has an associated cost. So going into the nitty-gritty of selection now and how selection is done. It is done slightly differently for domestic and international applicants, so bear with me while I jump between both. So the domestic applicants, 75% of the total selection score will be based on the adjusted DVM weighted average mark, and the remaining 25% is the situational judgment test or the Casper test score. Now, when I say adjusted DVM weighted average mark, on the next slide, I will explain what that means. International applicants, it's the adjusted DVM weighted average mark and the satisfactory performance in the situational judgment test. So rather than that 75%, 25% split, it's a adjusted DVM weighted average mark for the international applicants, and then the situational judgment test, there's that satisfactory performance benchmark to be able to proceed with the offer. So breaking down what the adjusted DVM Wham means, it means your DVM weighted average mark. So that's the calculation of your academic performance for DVM selection purposes. It's important that you understand that is not your Bachelor of Science Wham. It's not the Wham that you'll see on your transcript or in your my.unimob portal. It's a calculation that we do specifically for DVM selection, and that is 25% weighted towards your level 1 subject mark and 75% weighted towards your level 2 and any completed level 3 marks. So that is what we calculate to get your DVM Wham. We then add on any additional points for your personal statement and any additional points for Graduate Access Melbourne. And that is what is comprised for the adjusted DVM Wham. So as we said before, selection into the Vet BioSciences major or the accelerated pathway occurs simultaneously with selection into DVM1 or graduate entry. So we pull everybody together and selection's done at the same time. There's no special time for which we do the accelerated pathway and a special time for which we do graduate entry. As I said before, we're looking at about 160 places for the next upcoming intake. In terms of how we do the allocation of places, so students with a guaranteed offer, GDP or guaranteed entry applicants are allocated first. So then we can see how many places we have remaining. And then that's when we do the rankings. CSPs, we assume obviously that CSPs are going to be the most coveted. So those ones will be allocated first, and then Australian full fee paying places second. We do have selection ongoing throughout the end of January and even into February, because as we make offers, we wait for acceptances, and then if there are any offers not accepted, then we make offers to the next people on the wait list. So that's sort of why we do ask for you to be patient and understand that if you have heard of somebody else receiving an offer, that doesn't mean that you were unsuccessful. We will contact you at the point at which we have sort of had that cutoff, where we'll give you an outcome either way. But it is possible that even after that date, if students do withdraw from the course or withdraw their acceptance, then we might end up having to make 1 or 2 late offers. So that's just something to be mindful of. In terms of next steps after today, what you can do now to prepare, well, the first thing you could do is you could register for the Casper test. You know that you're going to have to take it, so it's up to you which of the next 3 test dates that you choose to sit, but you can register for that now. You can start preparing your personal statement. So even though you can't access the DVM Accelerated Pathway application just yet, not till next week, the personal statement template is on our website, so you are welcome to download that and start preparing that. You can also start preparing your Graduate Access Melbourne application if you are going to apply for Graduate Access Melbourne. As I said, we require documentation to support any of the statements in that application, so sometimes it might take a little bit of time for you to gather that documentation. You need to prepare for re-enrolment for the Bachelor of Science for 2024. So as you know, re-enrolment deadlines will occur before we actually have selection. So you'll need to still re-enroll. And it's really important that our applicants are enrolling in their subjects next year as though they are not made an offer to the Veterinary BioSciences major. So please do your enrolment as though you are not receiving an offer for the accelerated pathway. And if you do receive an offer for the accelerated pathway, we'll be able to change your enrolment at that time. So in January or February. The reason why we need you to still do your re-enrolment, even if you have a guaranteed offer, please still do your re-enrolment because there are fines associated with you not having done your re-enrolment at the university level. So please do that. So yes, again, so as we said, from early September, so the 5th of September, applications open. Please make sure you submit your GAM application, personal statement, contact details of referees. So you might also need to reach out to the people who you plan to have as your referees, just to give them the heads up that you're providing their details and that they may be contacted by the selection committee in January or February next year to verify what's been put in that personal statement. If your application is not successful, so if you apply for the accelerated pathway, you're not successful, you will still need to complete your Bachelor of Science in 2024 with a different major. It's key to understand that the Veterinary BioSciences major is only available to students who have been made an offer for the accelerated pathway. So you won't be able to select those subjects when you do your re-enrollment, only when we allow you to, is when you can. So you'll need to pick a different major, complete your Bachelor of Science, and then you can always apply for the DVM again as a graduate entry. So doing the full 4 years of the DVM program. The Wham would be different. So it would be recalculated based on your results across level 2 and level 3 subjects rather than 1 and 2. So that's something to be mindful of. So just because you weren't competitive for an offer for the accelerated pathway doesn't mean that you wouldn't be competitive for graduate entry, because you would have an opportunity then to perform strongly in your final year of your Bachelor of Science. And because those level 3 subjects are worth 75% of your DVM Wham, you have a real chance of actually being able to improve that Wham and be competitive for a place in the graduate entry. So that concludes my presentation. Just wanted to direct you all to the our website. If you haven't already had a look, a lot of the questions that you might have about our selection are on our website. We have a selection guidelines document that is quite extensive and answers pretty much everything that you might have to ask. But otherwise, we do have an inquiry form also on that website. So if you have any questions specific to you, you can enter those questions in the inquiry form. It will go to Saxon and her team, and they work with us to provide you with as much bespoke, tailored advice as we can. Otherwise, I will open up to Q&A and Saxon.
Thank you, Emma. That was a fantastic presentation. It's hopefully answered a lot of questions for many students, but as we know, this application process can be a little bit complex to get your head around. So we do have some other questions that have been posted in the chat. And just a reminder to students or participants in today's webinar that you can vote on the questions if you would like something that's already been asked by another attendee to be answered. You can vote and that will show me which ones you'd like answered the most, given that we've got small amounts of time. The most upvoted question though, Emma, was a question about how referees as part of the personal statement. And the question that I've got here is that what kind of referees can we use? Do they have to be from a veterinary or animal sciences background, or can they be something like a supervisor or something else? So what advice would you give to those students?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And sorry, I probably should have clarified that in the presentation. So as I said, there's no expectation that applicants have completed work experience at a veterinary clinic or, been working hands-on with animals in order to get into the DVM. So equally, there's no expectation that those referees are veterinarians. I suppose the main thing is to make sure that you're providing a referee who can speak to whatever it is that you have provided in your personal statement. So that could be a supervisor from your part-time job. It could be an academic mentor that you have at the university or an academic that you've worked closely with. It could be people that you have worked with in your community and sporting clubs, whatever it is that you've been speaking about in your personal statement. Provide the referee that can best speak to that.
Excellent. Our next questions is what factors can increase the DVM Wham? So what things can contribute points to that calculation?
So if we're talking about just the DVM Wham rather than the adjusted Wham, the DVM Wham is pretty much set. So as we said, it's that 25% of that DVM Wham is based on your performance in your level 1 subjects, and 75% is based on your performance in your level 2 subjects. So we're still in semester 2, so you've got time to turn it around if you need to, and that will have a significant impact on your DVM Wham, because 75% of it is on your level 2 subjects. So that would be the biggest, I guess, way to boost your DVM Wham. In terms of the adjusted Wham, so that's where you'll have the DVM Wham and then any additional points, so the personal statement, and then Graduate Access Melbourne as well. So if you do feel that that the categories for Graduate Access Melbourne apply to you, we really do strongly encourage you to please look into that and apply and give yourself the best opportunity.
Awesome. Our next question is, how many international students usually get an offer via the accelerated pathway? There's a similar question as to how many international students get places in the course overall. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a difficult one to answer because it does completely vary from year to year. And as we say, there's no, we don't have any prejudice towards whether you're an undergraduate or accelerated pathway applicant or whether you're a graduate entry applicant. It's really just dependent on who we get apply in any given year and who meets the criteria for a place, or who ranks highly for a place. So whether you're undergraduate or graduate entry, it really doesn't matter.
Awesome. Yeah, it can vary from year to year depending on our applicants. We've got 2 questions about the Casper test. One is, what kind of preparation is needed for the Casper, or is there anything that you recommend to best prepare for the test? And a second part to that is, do students need to complete the Casper test before submitting their application? So a little bit more of an admin question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So the first one is that the purpose of the test is designed so that there isn't really any way that you can prepare. I mean, it's a way to test your people skills. And so in terms of preparing for performance in the test, I would say there probably isn't anything you could be doing. That said, obviously feeling like you can perform your best and truly reflect your abilities in the test is a different question. And so I would say, please go on the website where you'll need to register. The Acuity Insights website actually does have information about the test. So at least you'll be prepared in terms of knowing what to expect, how long it goes for, what kind of questions you'll be asked. And so that might even help if there's nerves or something like that. That might be a good way to feel more confident going into the test. And the admin question, sorry, just remind me again what that was. Whether you have to do it before you apply, sorry. No, so you don't, as long as you do one of the 3 test dates. And so one of them is in, I think the 5th of December is our last one. So that would be well after accelerated pathway applications close. So any of the 3 is fine. We'll receive those results in time for selection in January. So no, you don't have to have completed it before the application.
Beautiful. We've got another question about kind of how the Vet BioSciences major progresses into the DVM. So do students, after completing the Veterinary BioSciences major and obviously graduating from their Bachelor of Science, do they need to proceed to complete the DVM immediately the next year, or can they apply for a deferral or a leave of absence?
Yeah, good question. So if it is, so we don't offer deferrals in the DVM. However, in this case, it would more so be considered a sort of like a leave of absence. So a leave of absence is effectively when you're already in a degree and you want to take a break. A leave of absence application, so going from DVM 1 to DVM 2, is subject to approval by the head of school. And as with any LOA application in the DVM, there does need to be extenuating circumstances and supporting documentation for the leave of absence request. So, you know, it wouldn't be approved if you were just looking to take, you know, the equivalent to a gap year. Sorry, my cat is being very difficult. If you were looking to take the equivalent to a gap year and travel or something like that, it's very unlikely that would be approved. But if you have extenuating circumstances as to why you might need to have a break, you can apply. Administratively, it is a deferral, but we would treat it like a leave of absence.
Lovely. Circling back to Casper, we have a question from an international student, or from our international students, wondering what constitutes satisfactory performance in like a Casper score for international students.
Yeah, this is one that we get quite a lot, and I have to be really frustrating in my answer and say that it's not a score that we release to applicants, so it can change from year to year depending on the selection committee's determination of what that satisfactory performance benchmark is. Applicants, when you complete the Casper test within a couple of weeks, Acuity Insights, the company that runs the Casper test, will provide you with an indication of the quartile that you have fallen into, and it's actually a ranking score, a Z score that we receive. So the benchmark is set each year by the selection committee, and therefore we don't release that information.
Lovely. And another question regarding Casper. Casper's been very popular today. Can you retake the Casper test, or in what circumstances could you retake it?
So you can't retake the Casper test for the intake that you're applying for. So in other words, we've got 5 test dates this year. You can only take the test once. The only situation where you would take the test twice is if you were applying again for a subsequent year.
Okay. If students don't get into, or if applicants don't get into the Veterinary BioSciences major, what majors would you recommend students consider completing in order to be competitive for entry, for graduate entry into the program?
Good question. So we don't actually provide any more favourable weighting or consideration towards a DVM application based on, you know, how similar the major is to the DVM, or whichever major we like more. Saying that, obviously there are certain majors that will set you up for success more in the DVM than others, some that are more relevant to your DVM study. So obviously having a really strong biochemistry foundation is something that will really help you once you are in the DVM. We obviously have the animal health and disease majors, or animal science majors in the Bachelor of Science, which is generally quite popular with our applicants. There are a couple of majors in the Bachelor of Science that potentially would put you at risk of not being eligible for DVM selection. So for instance, if there's not enough science study at level 3, we might have to reconsider whether you would have an appropriate foundation. So for instance, psychology subjects aren't generally considered science for the purpose of DVM selection, but if you have any concerns about the major that you're considering taking, that's where you can pop in a question in that inquiry form that I mentioned on the website. That will come to Saxon's team, and Saxon and I can have a conversation about whether we think that would be an appropriate major for DVM selection or not.
Lovely. Yeah, we can definitely help you with that. I believe I've posted the inquiry link that you can submit inquiries to us into some of the questions that have been answered, and especially for those that are a little bit more one-on-one or case-by-case basis, so we can help you offline outside of the webinar as well. We have a question from one of our graduate degree package students. They're wanting to know how the personal statement would impact their application, or if it's more of a just they have to do it for the sake of meeting requirements.
Yeah, so look, it is a little bit of that. It is that everybody has to do the personal statement regardless. In terms of the GDP, the personal statement does not play into the selection for GDP. However, saying that, it's still really important that the personal statement is taken seriously no matter what, because there have been instances in the past where a student might have a GDP, but then they actually haven't met the conditions. You know, say we've got the 70% level 1 average, 70% level 2 average, and so therefore if they want that safety net of potentially being considered for competitive entry, then the personal statement would come into play. And so we do recommend that even students with a GDP do take the personal statement seriously.
Lovely. We've got a question about accommodation at Werribee and what advice you would give for students, like when should they start looking for accommodation. A little bit down the track for our applicants or potential applicants here with us today, but when would students start looking for accommodation for the Werribee campus, and where would you advise them to look?
Yes, so as it currently stands, the current curriculum is that DVM1 applicants, DVM1 students, so first year students, go down to Werribee 1 day a week. So at the moment it's every Friday, I think. In DVM2, it's also 1 day a week. And then from third year, it's full-time at Werribee. And fourth year, we do say Werribee is the ideal home base to have, but of course, fourth year is clinical rotations for the full year. So doing EMS, so extramural placements, and being out at our distributed practices. So you kind of here, there and everywhere in fourth year. You're not necessarily going to be in Werribee week after week. So it's really going to be a personal decision about whether you want to be based in Parkville or around Melbourne CBD in your first couple of years, or whether you'd rather be in Werribee or somewhere in between. That's a personal decision for each student to make. Generally, most of our students don't move up or don't move down to Werribee until third year.
Lovely. We might just stay on for a few more questions, just given that we started a bit later, if that's okay.
Sure.
I've got two questions about kind of the DVM Wham calculations, and I know that these can be a bit hard to answer in these kind of webinar sessions without knowing the individual circumstances of someone's transcripts and results. But I've got two questions that kind of fit into this category. So the first one is, I think, relating to more so the GDP side of the scores required. So the student has written for the 70% average across level 1 and level 2 subjects. Can some subjects be below that 70%? Or if other subjects compensate and bring that overall average above 70%, or do all subjects need to be at that 70% and above mark?
Yeah, so it's the former, so it's an average. So if you have one subject that's a 69, you're not out. If you have marks that are above 70, as long as it averages out across level 1 above 70, then you're fine. Same for level 2. One of the things that we've had that has been a little bit of caused a little bit of confusion with applicants in the past is that it's not level 1 and level 2 combined 70%. It's level 1 70%, level 2 70%. So just to be clear on that.
Excellent clarification. And in that same kind of space, if a student has failed a subject, will that fail grade be used as part of their DVM Wham calculations?
Yes, it will.
Okay, just to clarify, I thought that was the case. We have another question. I'm just getting it up, apologies. If students complete the Veterinary BioSciences major, it's probably a little bit more straightforward, but can they graduate just with that Bachelor's of Science, or do they have to complete the full DVM pathway for it to be considered a full qualification?
So the answer is yes. So technically, yes, you can complete the Bachelor of Science with the Veterinary BioSciences major and not progress to the DVM. Obviously, from our standpoint, we don't want to see that happen because, we can't fill that place in the DVM again. So, if you have any, intentions not to progress with the DVM, that would be really unfortunate for another applicant who missed out on a spot. So we really hope that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, it's a very competitive program, so hopefully you would continue. I think you've mentioned this before, but can you clarify the contact hours for each year level, in particular the third year DVM 3?
Yeah, so actually that will be in the application guide that we send out in the next week. So when I mentioned the application guide that we'd send out, it does have information about, yes, the application and all of the requirements and how to fill those bits and pieces out, but it also provides information about fees, and it also speaks about the contact hours or the expected contact hours and the amount of time that you'll probably be expected to study independently across each of those year levels, and therefore the limits that might have on your ability to complete part-time work in those respective years as well. So if you don't mind, I'll leave that until we send that guide out to you.
Lovely. I think we're getting close to almost like answering all of our unique questions. Just having a quick look at what's been written. Oh, this is a good question. A student has asked, what would they do? What should they do if their referees don't speak English? Does the referees as part of their personal statement, do they have to be English speaking in the chance that you guys need to contact them?
We have had a couple of instances in that over the years where we've had to contact somebody and English wasn't their first language, or they didn't speak good English. Generally, we cross that bridge when we come to it. Often it doesn't necessarily have to be a phone call. We might be able to email them, do a little bit of crafty translation work if needed. But we also have a really diverse selection committee and a number of academics across the school who speak lots of different languages and come from lots of different backgrounds. So sometimes we might even enlist their help if needed. But there's no expectation that you're providing any translation service or anything like that, if that's what the question was getting at.
I think so. We've got a question about the timing of the program. Are students expected to start the program at the regular kind of standard semester start time, or should they prepare to have to attend to a few activities in advance of standard semester timings, such as vaccinations or orientation?
That's a very good question. So actually, as of last year, or this year, I suppose, we have actually been asking our DVM students, especially those that are offshore, to get to Australia a week prior to orientation week. And that's because of the, as I mentioned before, the new large animal handling training that we've been doing up at Dookie. That is done in weeks 4 and 5 of first semester. And so the Q fever vaccination has to be completed at least 2 weeks prior to that large animal handling training, just to give time for the vaccine to seroconvert. So we do run a session for our DVM students through the University Health Service, where the skin and blood test is done in the first week, and then the vaccination is done in the subsequent week. So we try to do the vaccination during orientation week. That said, students can also do the Q fever vaccination independently with their own GP or with the University Health Service privately. So it's up to you whether you utilise the service that we put on or not. But other than that, O week is really when we expect you.
Yeah, lovely. We've got a question, maybe in the larger context of studying veterinary sciences. A student has asked why the program is so competitive if there is a well-known kind of shortage of veterinary professionals in Australia. Could you explain maybe why there's only that many places available in the program?
Yeah, sure. And this is one actually that we do get quite a lot. So there are a couple of reasons why. First reason is to do with the spaces that we have available. We obviously use specialised spaces for our veterinary teaching, and those spaces have capacity limits. So most of them can only teach up to 160 students, most of our labs, specialised labs and things like that. Another reason is to do with the quality of teaching, to be honest. Being able to make sure that our academic staff are there to give our students the proper time and attention that they need through this course is really, really important. So staff teaching ratios, staff student ratios is a very important consideration, and it's something that also the accrediting bodies for our course have a very strong vested interest in. So while we do appreciate the comments about the shortage of vets in Australia or even globally at the moment, we're also accountable to what the accrediting bodies expect. So the AVBC, the AVMA and the RCVS are the three accrediting bodies that we have for the DVM, and they also set the rules around how many students we can take in each year.
Lovely. We'll answer just a few more because I'm aware that it's coming to the end and Emma's probably very tired and probably needs a big drink of water.
This all day, don't you worry.
You're a whiz. I've got a question from our CSP prospective applicants. Is it assumed that everyone applying domestically would like to be considered for a Commonwealth supported place? Or do students need to indicate that they would like to be considered for a Commonwealth supported place in the application?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, this will be in the application guide, but it is technically two separate applications. It is just the one application, but at the start of when you go into your application portal, when you type in the DVM as one of the courses that you're looking to apply for, you'll see that there'll be two. If you're a domestic student, two will come up. You'll have the CSP and the Australian full fee categories that you can apply for. So if you are only wanting to apply for a CSP, you just apply for the CSP, you just tick the one box. If you want to be considered for both, tick both. And when we're doing the application assessment in January, February, we will obviously consider you for both and assume that the CSP is the one that would be your first preference.
Lovely. I've got a question about the changes to the veterinary medicine program that happened at the start of 2022. So students have asked, I've heard that there's some changes to the facilities recently, so probably referencing UVet. Will this affect our studies practically and our final accreditation?
Mm-hmm. So I will start by prefacing this by saying this is probably more of an academic question. I'm probably not the best person to answer this, but what I can say very briefly is that the distributed model that we now have in place, Green Cross coming in and running the veterinary clinic or the veterinary hospital that we have at Werribee, we have an excellent relationship with Green Cross, and a number of our clinical rotations in fourth year are still happening at the very same hospital that they were last year. It's just that Green Cross is running that now, but it's still the same place, and a number of the clinical rotations are still happening there. Everything that we have put forward for our clinical rotations in the distributed model has been with the accrediting body's oversight. They're well aware of it. We've recently had our accreditation site visit, so everything is above board in that respect. But in terms of further questions that you might have about that, I recommend either you can put through an inquiry on the website and we can direct you to some appropriate staff in the veterinary school. The academic staff are probably the ones you want to hear from about this more so than me. So we can put you in touch with the right people if you have some concerns about that.
Lovely. I've got probably a very straightforward question, but it says on the website, it said that we need to provide an English language certificate or proof of English language requirements. Do students currently studying at University of Melbourne in their second year, so obviously students studying Frontiers, do they need to provide this certificate or can they just apply?
Yeah, so everybody has to fill out the English language requirements section of the application. I think that's actually for every course at the university. But there's a number of different categories that you can select that you meet the criteria for, I suppose. And one of them is if you have completed your undergraduate degree entirely taught and assessed in English, which anybody who's done their full bachelor's degree at the University of Melbourne would satisfy. I know technically you've only done the first 2 years and you haven't completed the full 3 years, but remembering that the application for the DVM is actually for the 2025 intake. So that doesn't actually come into effect until you've officially completed your Bachelor of Science. And so therefore, by completing the Veterinary BioSciences major, you have actually effectively met the English language requirement, which is that your whole undergraduate degree was taught and assessed in English.
Lovely. And we've got, I'm going to leave it to maybe like 1 or 2 more questions. They're absolutely flooding through. Do I need to provide proof of internship experience with the application?
So that would be probably as part of the personal statement. So we don't have any selection tool that specifically addresses internship experience, but as part of the personal statement, you would be outlining your work experience, relevant work experience in that table. And so then you would have also probably a referee then from that internship that can attest to what you've put in there. So that's where I suppose that would be considered as part of the total selection score.
Lovely. And one more, well, maybe just two more. We've got one question about scholarships and one question about when will students receive outcomes. So we'll start with the easy one. For students applying for the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, the Veterinary BioSciences pathway starting in 2024, when will students, when will applicants receive their outcome of their application?
Yeah. So for our guaranteed entry applicants, they'll receive their outcome around about Christmas time, so just before the university close down break, late December. So mid to late December is when those offers will go out, because as I said, we have to do those offers first and then get an idea of those acceptances before we can then rank and allocate offers through the competitive process. So the competitive process, or the standard entry, is done throughout January. So we usually start doing the first round of offers for those mid to late January. And the acceptance deadlines are usually very short. So normally a week or less that you will have. So please keep an eye on your emails over that time. Because if you miss the acceptance deadline, that offer will lapse and it will be made to the next person on the list until we fill up all of those 160 places. We generally say that we will provide an outcome to everybody by usually the 1st of February, 1st or 2nd of February. So that means that, if you were unsuccessful, you'll also receive that unsuccessful email on the 1st or 2nd of February. But as I said, it is possible that a student will withdraw after that time, and then we will try and fill that place with the next person on the wait list. But obviously we want to manage expectations that, that's probably only likely to be 1 or 2, if anybody.
Lovely. And we've got a question about, are there any scholarships for international students, or are there ones that are internally considered, or are there external providers that you can recommend?
Mm-hmm. So there are, if you actually have to go to the University of Melbourne scholarships website, and then it will list the University of Melbourne scholarships, and it will also list some of our faculty specific scholarships. And the requirements, eligibility requirements are listed in there. One of the things that was mentioned on the fees page, just to bear in mind, is that yes, some scholarships and bursaries are available, but we don't want any of our students to rely on those scholarships and bursaries to be able to fund the tuition fees, particularly for those with an Australian full fee paying place or an overseas fee paying place. They probably won't make up the difference between the help loan limit and the remainder of those tuition fees. So definitely still have a look at what's available online, but just be mindful of that.
Lovely. Well, we've got heaps of other questions to go. but I'm conscious of time. So we might need to wrap up there, and otherwise for students who are wishing to submit an inquiry, you can do so via accessing the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine website, so the page on study. So if you have any specific questions that haven't been answered today or covered by Emma, which I feel like she's covered absolutely almost everything, feel free to send us an inquiry via the study webpage for the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending. We will have recorded this webinar, so for students who want to refer back to it as well, we will be circulating this. And for students who haven't attended, which would be weird to address them right now, that will also be available to them as well. But thank you so much, Emma, for all your work. You've done a lot of work answering a lot of burning questions.
Thank you. I hope I haven't raised more questions than answers, but yeah, we appreciate you all being here.
Thank you, everyone.